At 923 hours, in the heart of the South China Sea, a single blip appeared on the radar of a United States Navy destroyer. A blip that would trigger one of the tensest modern encounters between the US and China. A blip that, for 41 minutes, brought two nuclear superpowers closer to war than the world would ever know. Because on that humid morning, a Chinese Type 52D destroyer didn't just intercept an American ship. It challenged the backbone of US maritime power, and the Americans were prepared to prove exactly why doing that remains a spectacularly bad idea. The South China Sea, a patch of ocean worth $3.4 trillion in annual trade. A place where fishing boats, tankers, and cargo ships move like arteries feeding the world economy. And a place Beijing has slowly tried to turn into its personal kingdom, with artificial islands, militarized reefs, and aggressive patrols. For the United States, this isn't just water. It's a test of freedom of navigation, global order, and the credibility of a navy that's kept sea lanes open for 75 years. On this particular morning, the USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser loaded with 122 missile tubes, was conducting a routine patrol, a calm, almost boring exercise, until Chinese radar signatures began to spike, until a destroyer altered course directly toward the American ship, and until aircraft began lifting off a distant Chinese carrier. The peaceful ocean was about to turn into a chessboard. The Chinese destroyer accelerated from 18 to 30 knots in under 90 seconds. Inside the Princeton's Combat Information Center, screens lit up. Tactical Action Officer, COM. Contact confirmed. Type 052D. Moderate to high threat. Translation: a modern Chinese warship equipped with long-range anti-ship missiles. The American reply: calm professionalism and overwhelming capability. The USS Nimitz, 100,000 tons of floating American diplomacy, shifted flight operations. Two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers repositioned to defend the carrier. Data from Princeton's spy, one radar fed into every ship in the strike group through CEC, cooperative engagement capability. If one ship saw a threat, they all saw it. China's Navy didn't have anything even remotely similar. This was the first reminder of the day. The U.S. doesn't fight ship against ship, it fights as a network. 250 miles away, the Chinese carrier Shandong launched J-15 fighters. But the E-2D Hawkeye, the U.S. Navy's Flying Command Center, saw them instantly. The J-15 struggled to climb. Without aircraft catapults, they launch with lower fuel and payload. Every second they spent climbing burned precious fuel. Meanwhile, F/A-18 Super Hornets exploded off the Nimitz deck at full combat weight. Chinese fighters were fighting gravity. American fighters were fighting the enemy. EA-18G Growlers entered the battle space. Their ELQ-99 pods unleashed a storm of electronic noise. On Chinese radar screens, contacts duplicated, positions shifted, ghost aircraft appeared. What looked like 4 American jets became 12. Chinese pilots were suddenly blind in the skies they thought they controlled. Then came the real threat. Sonar operators on Princeton detected a submarine. Type 039, a diesel-electric boat creeping toward the American formation. But it was loud, very loud. American sonar had been tracking it long before the Chinese captain realized he'd been discovered. If war broke out, the sub would have 12 seconds to live. At 0947, the Chinese warship did something extremely dangerous. It locked its fire control radar onto the USS Nimitz. This is the naval equivalent of placing your finger on the trigger and pointing the gun at someone's head. American procedures allowed an immediate lethal response. But the US held fire, documenting everything, ready for whatever came next. The message was clear. Discipline doesn't mean weakness. AJ-15 broke formation and buzzed an American F/A-18. An aggressive, unprofessional thump. The American pilot, Top Gun trained, calmly rolled inverted and landed behind the J-15's 6 o'clock position. For 3 seconds, he held a perfect firing solution. He could have ended the engagement instantly. He didn't. Professionalism again saved lives. The Chinese submarine surfaced its snorkel to recharge batteries. It was fully exposed, and American weapons were locked on. At the same moment, the Nimitz launched its largest show of force in years, 48 aircraft in one wave, a sky darkened by American steel. Growlers jammed everything. Hornets formed a high-low engagement wall. The E-2D coordinated the aerial battlefield. China had no options left. A Virginia-class U.S. submarine, silent, undetected, and watching everything, suddenly burst from the ocean 6 miles from the Chinese carrier. It surfaced purely to be seen. That was the breaking point. China's carrier group turned away. Not officially as a retreat, of course. Beijing later called it concluding scheduled operations. But everyone knew exactly what happened. The encounter never made headlines. It never became a crisis. No shots were fired. No ships were damaged. But behind the scenes, it sent shockwaves across military intelligence communities. China had pushed hard. Aircraft, ships, subs, radar locks. And the U.S. Navy responded with measured, overwhelming dominance. Superior radar. Superior air wings. Superior electronic warfare. Superior submarine capability. Superior command and control. And discipline that prevented a war. For Beijing, the lesson was undeniable. The South China Sea may be contested, but the U.S. Navy still owns the deep end of the pool. In 41 minutes, two great powers stared down the edge of catastrophe. And in 41 minutes, America's sailors proved something far more powerful than missiles or aircraft. Skill, control, professionalism, and a mastery of naval warfare forged through a century of experience. War didn't come that day, not because China backed down, not because the U.S. escalated, but because one navy showed restraint and the other learned respect. And in the silent tension of that 41-minute encounter, the future of the Pacific was shaped without a single shot fired.